right, everybody, welcome back. I'm Howie Howard from Mr. Furious Records, and today on Dat Fury Radio, Matt Tate is back. We're going to listen to some more music from his album 2024 recordings and have more of a maybe wide-ranging chat. We'll see where it goes. But I'm going to get a song started. That song is going to be 4/9/24. And I also have kind of a discussion question to kick us off for Matt's. And it kind of leads straight on from last week's episode that was more specifically about this album. But my question, Matt, is just what is your growth edge as a musician? It might be related to gear or composition or mindset, but where are you trying to get to next?
I think in the past it's been more dominated by gear, but I think now I've come up with this setup and this is it. I'm not going to buy anything new now. I've said this to myself in the past, but this time I'm going to stick to it. I believe I have all the tools there to do everything I should need to do without buying anything, and it's just down to putting in the hours and learning it all inside out that is going to take me to where I want to go in the future. So I'm trying to change what is going to progress my music, so it's actually me and not just being driven by new, bigger, better synths, I think.
So since this is intended to be a long-term setup, and some of our audience is pretty gear-oriented, not all, I hear you non-gear folks, but some are, so why don't you describe the setup a little bit for us?
Well, I bought a Novation 49 SL Mark III as my master keyboard now, so that's got a rudimentary sequencer on it, and you can also split it into zones, so that's what I'm going to use as my control interface. Now I've got two of the Sonicware boxes. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah.
But they're quite cute little plastic boxes. So I've got the Texture Lab, which is a granular synthesizer, and then an Ambient Zero, which is like a 4-part ambient groove box thing. You can have 10 voices in total, and you can divide them up how you want. And then the final piece of the puzzle is a Digitact 2. Because I saw some cool videos of a guy using one of those to basically mimic a Lyra 8. He was using, you got 16 tracks for samples on that, and he had a different note on each track, and he was fading them in and using LFOs and whatnot. And that will also allow me to use some vocal samples when I want them in my music.
That almost sounds like the way Alessandro Cortini uses the 4-track tape. Obviously much more limited in that scenario, but yeah, just having four sounds you can fade up and down.
Yes, so I've had the Sonicware boxes for a little while now, so I'm quite familiar with those, and the Digitact 2's fairly new, but I did have an original Digitact. So it's not really changed how it works, it's just got more capabilities now, so I feel a decent level of expertise with all of them, and hopefully I can just put the hours in, learn them inside out, and get some sense of mastery to them. That would be nice.
And the Novation has replaced the MPC in the workflow then?
Yes, that's the MIDI brain.
Yeah.
It's quite decent, actually. You can have 8 different sequences running on 8 different parts and 8 different arpeggiators running, so once I've learned how to quickly navigate all that, I think I'll be able to use it quite well. And also it's quite a small setup, so when I'm going to the gig in June, it should be quite easy to pack it all down, set it up, and then rebuild it when I get it home, you know? So, yeah. Like, I might add a big reverb pedal at the end of it or something, but I've not done that yet.
Sure, so right now for reverb, it's all the built-in stuffs for each individual synth?
Yeah, the Sonicware boxes have quite decent reverbs, and they've all got shimmers built in as well. So it does, in the stuff that I've recorded I'm listening back to, I think it does a really good job, to be fair. So yeah, I just need to put the hours in, that's all.
For sure.
That's all.
A lot of hours of fun to be had with that rig, and not to gush too much, but I mean, I really like what you do with reverb. There's a lot, obviously, but it's never too much. It never obscures the notes too much, or just myself as a listener, I do want to hear the notes and everything. I don't want just only the reverb wash, and to my ears you always stay just one tick below the full, I don't know, airplane hangar effect or whatever.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it's a knife edge you walk, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
it's very easy to go over it, but I think most of all, I'm not trying to put as much reverb on everything as possible just for some sort of, I don't know, it's got to sound good, hasn't it? That's the main thing that judges it.
Absolutely.
Hopefully in most cases I have judged it on the right side instead of going overboard.
Do you take the tape machine to gigs?
No. I've got a little, just a shitty little Behringer mixer that I use. It's like 4 tracks or whatever. That nearly set on fire when I redid my studio, so I think it just needs to stay very still and not be touched.
Probably a good idea.
I want to get invited back for more gigs, hopefully. I don't want to burn the pub down,
Maybe for the American audience, so I didn't do a full intro for you for this episode. That's in the previous episode. Like I said off mic, I'm not a podcaster. I'm a musician. Not a professional here. But maybe this is a good place for the American audience to say a little bit about Sheffield and the scene and what it's like being a musician in Sheffield.
Yes. Sheffield is quite a small city, as it goes. There was a stat that it had the most trees of any city in Europe or something, but I think they did some dodgy things with the actual city limits in order to get all the trees in, I guess it's a city it's famous for steel. That's the big thing about Sheffield, steel. Used to be very industrial. I guess it got hit quite hard by Margaret Thatcher and all the stuff about 80s decline. You might have seen the film Full Monty. I don't know if that's got anywhere. That's Sheffield.
Okay.
So lots of people are out of work because all the steel factories shut down. It was probably a shit job with quite bad, life-limiting conditions because of it. But so a lot of people were on the dole. So in the 80s, quite a lot of bands came from here, like Throbbing Gristle, I think, came from Sheffield. Human League, Phil Oakey, I don't know if you've had Human League in America.
We definitely had Human League. The Dare album was big here.
Yeah. So there was a thriving electronic music scene, I guess. And then that sort of gave way to Britpop or whatever you want to label pulp as, Warp Records, I think, were based in Sheffield, so
wow,
released a lot of the early Aphex Twin stuff. That was quite cool.
Legendary label.
Arctic Monkeys. They were from Sheffield. I don't know, yeah. So, as I said off air before we started filming, like Sheffield's in the middle of a triangle of Manchester, Leeds, and Nottingham. So, most of the big acts will like come here once by mistake, and then they just go to the other three places. So, if you want to see a big act, you've got to travel. But I think that has made the city quite good in terms of having to actually fend for itself and make its own music. So the DIY scene is quite good here, and there's quite an active electronic music DIY scene at the minute. Lots of little labels, there's lots of events, there's ambient nights. There's a lot more aggressive forms of electronic music, There's a lot of live coding, algoraves, that sort of stuff.
So that's something I've never heard of. Tell us, what's an algorave?
Algorave is where you, I guess, program the music. Like, I dabbled with it, but it wasn't for me. So I think maybe there's languages called there's maybe one called Orca and Tidal or whatever. So you do just basically program it, so it's like you make 4 while loops. So, when count is 1, play your bass drum, and then you increment it and you build up your rhythms and stuff like that. So it's quite interesting to watch, I think. Generally very full on, like sort of stuff, and it's on a lot later than I'd like to be up generally, I guess, or So you'd have someone there. You have a couple of people on stage performing, and then they project the code behind them on the wall, That's the general setup, so you can see them messing with the code and try and decipher what sort of impact that has on the music. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure that exists in video form too, so I'll try and find a decent example to link to. But yeah, I've never heard of that before. That's super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess I've struggled in the performance aspect of ambient music, especially when I'm doing it, is sort of non-existent, It's like I try and stay very still, not do much. So at least
really embody the sound.
Yeah, and just trying not to be scared, So people can see, the code on the screen, and I think most people have a vague idea of what's going on with code nowadays, so you can, well, even if you don't understand it, you can try and interpret it, But yeah, there's a lot of nights. And Sheffield has quite a big student population as well, so they're up for late nights, loud music, proper aggro electronic stuff. Yeah, I like it, I think. I grew up in Manchester and I moved to Sheffield when I was 27 or whatever. Well, I grew up on the outskirts of Manchester.
Okay.
But Manchester felt to me like a bit more intimidating. The people maybe weren't as friendly. In Sheffield, people generally seem a lot more relaxed and friendlier, so it's easier for me to exist here.
It sounds pretty nice, honestly. I haven't spent any time in England. I visited Ireland and the Isle of Man. My wife's ancestors are from the Isle of Man, not too far back. It's either her maternal grandmother or great grandmother, but I think just her maternal grandmother and grandpa, her husband, emigrated from the Isle of Man to America. So, and she still has family there that she's in. We stayed with. I don't know the exact relation, but some cousins, but family that she's in touch with, and Anyway, that's as close as I've come to spending time in England, but I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay generally. You know, like the politics is going downhill rapidly and stuff.
Oh man,
okay,
we haven't talked about politics and we don't need to, but I imagine we're fairly well aligned against the global right-wing power grab.
Yeah, I'd say that.
So I know you've got you're an NFL fan, American football. And the game has made an effort to become more international and with some success at least. So tell me how you came to be an NFL fan.
I think it was like quite a big crisis of masculinity, I guess. My auntie, she moved to America a long time ago, so she had a Texan husband, I guess. So when he came over, like, he'd talk about American football and he was into it, you know. So I bought Madden, you know, while he was over on the Wii, I think it was. It was like a really bizarre version of it where you had to like wave the controller to like be the wind and try and make field goals miss and stuff. It was totally bonkers. And like he explained it vaguely how American football works. I started watching it for a while. And then, like I say, some sort of crisis of masculinity, I looked it up and there was a club in Manchester that played called the Manchester Titans. So I went down one Easter Sunday when they were doing like open tryouts, or an open day really. As long as you had a heartbeat and a bank account, you could play for them really. So like,
Gotcha.
As long as you could pay your subs, you're on the team, you know. So yeah, I did that, and I played for like 3 years, but I was quite injury plagued, and then I did the stats for a couple of years, you know. And then I gradually fell away from it from there. But I still watch the Super Bowl.
Sure.
Most years and stuff.
Well, you played more than me. I was a runner. When I was a little kid, so in the town I grew up in, 5th grade was the first like youth football. So that would be like 11, 12-year-olds.
Okay.
But I wasn't a particularly strong kid. I was pretty nerdy, and so I wasn't terribly inclined to do it anyway. And then my mom embarrassed me by saying, well, you can only be the kicker. I won't allow you to play any other position. And I was like, well, the kicker is not cool, so I don't want to be the kicker. So I just never played. And really so this was small town Nebraska, USA. If you didn't get into it by junior high, 7th, 8th grade, it wasn't going to happen. Like, nobody started later than that. So I got into distance running and never played football. We played, you know, casually in the backyard and whatever, but I never played I never put pads on.
Well, that's probably good for your brain, isn't it, really? Like all the stuff about CTE and like subconcussive impacts or whatever, it just... I guess that's sort of my relationship with it, 'cause it's sort of a blood sport, isn't it? The way these players just use themselves up. I don't think
it kind of is. And I had kind of pretty much stepped away from any type of fandom or relationship until Patrick Mahomes arrived in Kansas City. And Patrick, I'm not a particular fan of the Kansas City club, but Patrick Mahomes as an individual is so incredible, arguably the greatest player ever. We'll see, maybe not there yet, but could be someday. it's pretty hard to not watch a little bit, you know.
Yeah. Well, one of the lads, a running back called Dave at the Manchester Titans, he was like a Chiefs fan, but this was, I guess, around like 2010 sort of time.
When they were terrible?
He was just like this mad little Chiefs fan, like of this team that were just terrible. And I don't know if he'd ever won anything before then or whatever, but it was a very strange team for him to pick. But I guess it's paid off in the long run. Like
he was ahead of the curve. Certainly no one in 2010 expected what the last 6 or 7 years have been.
No. Me and him went to London to watch one of the games at Wembley Stadium. It was like the 49ers versus someone else, and it just stunk. It was like a terrible game.
Yeah, but you all get the Jaguars a lot for some reason.
There's always talk about them like trying to make them a London franchise, isn't there, or something, but it's a long commute, isn't it?
Yeah, the logistics are tough. It would mess with the whole schedule. You know, a weird NFL thing, I don't know if you know, the schedule is made by some old couple who have had the job for decades and still, I mean, there's kind of rules and everything, but there's two people, husband and wife. I'll find a link and put it in the description to this story. Within the parameters of the rules, like, they just make up the schedule. It's not nearly as like logical or rule based as you'd expect. And that's how some, you know, over the last few years, analysts have gotten more and more into the rest advantage, and that goes back to the head trauma and everything, but like rest advantage is a huge factor in your chances of winning, and some teams over the course of a season can end up with 6 or 7 days advantage over other teams depending on how the schedule gets worked out. So it's this massive deal that's determined by just these two people because they started doing it in 1970 or whatever.
It's not been farmed out to ChatGPT yet.
You would think they'd do that, or just come up with a better system. I mean, I don't think ChatGPT could do a great job or anything, but yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, I was like short and skinny, so like you're a wide receiver, and it's like if you can't catch, then we'll make you a cornerback. We'll see how it goes. It's like completely insane. Like, you know, if you're just big and fat, it's like you're a lineman. It's like
right.
If you're big and fat and you can run a bit, then you're a defensive lineman. And you know, like one time we played a team called the Chester Romans, and they had like a 60-year-old wide receiver, like pure white hair, like all tiny and sort of hunched over. The cornerbacks were like, we can't tackle this guy. If we do, he's just going to explode into a pile
break a hip,
dust.
yeah.
Which is maybe a good ploy for a wide receiver. Like, you get a lot of touchdowns maybe.
Yeah, there's a movie to be made about that guy.
Yeah, it's a strange time. And like we'd have to travel up to Edinburgh to play the Edinburgh Wolves because there wasn't that many teams, you know. So you'd go on like a 2-day coach trip, 1 day up there to get there, and you play the game, and then you come back on the coach the next day, sort of thing. It was. I guess it's an example of like DIY culture, isn't it? You know, like we all want to play American football, and we're gonna do it on a shoestring budget and whatever. One of the first times I came to Sheffield was because there was an old dilapidated stadium here that they used to host like the Brit Bowl finals at. So I drove over from Manchester to this stadium in Sheffield and watched the. I think the Titans lost that year, but then they won the year after when I'd stopped playing or something.
American football is an expensive game to DIY. All the equipment, the field. Yeah, it's complicated.
I think there were a lot of arguments and discussions with like linesmen who were only used to painting soccer pitches, I guess as you'd call them, or rugby pitches, like trying to get them to do all the proper lines for American football was quite challenging, I think.
And do you know, was the field marked in yards? Like, because in Canada they might do meters, but obviously here it's yards.
I think it was yards, yeah. They had the chains and everything.
That's wild, man. From the gridiron to the ambient music.
Yeah, after I did American football, I was like, well, what can I do? So I took up swing dancing for a bit, which is not really the natural progression, I guess. But
so that must have been, like, what roughly year was that? Because there was a big swing trend in the late 90s here. But this sounds like it was later.
Yeah, that was probably about 2010, 2011 or something.
Okay.
Because like there was a famous Gap advert, wasn't there, with Lindy Hoppers in it, I think.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s. That was kind of cool. Like, I met a lot of nice people, and they do that all over. So, you know, I went on some holidays to Europe to do dancing and whatever. And that was quite fun. And the music's really good. I like all the old swing music, you know.
Yeah.
Like Count Basie and stuff like that. I think it's really great. The amount of energy that's in it, and like the virtuosity of some of the musicians is really cool.
Yeah, they called some of that hot jazz, and you can kind of hear the heat in it. I mean, very appropriate name. This works out perfect. I know what we're going to do. I'm going to wrap up here. In the edit, I'm going to send them out on the last piece from 2024 recordings that we haven't heard yet. This has been 13/9/24. Once we finish the outro, listeners, you're going to hear 27/5/24 by M Tate off the album 2024 recordings, which we have been enjoying for the past 2 weeks. Matt, don't hang up, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm a huge fan of your music. Would love to have you back at some point. You mentioned in the last episode, I think, a potential June release. We'll talk about that offline. But listeners, Matt's stuff is available. We recommend mtate.bandcamp.com, link in the description. You can also find it on your major streaming platforms. Matt's Instagram is in the notes. Gig in June in Sheffield. Details in the notes if we have them. If not, follow on Instagram. I'll link to Matt's website as well. Matt, what am I forgetting?
That seems like quite a comprehensive roundup of my, my online presence. I am going to try and host a improvised comedy night in September. Is it September? Might be October. Around a conceit of a World Giant Jenga Championship. but with like the trappings of BattleBots or the WWE. So if I can pull it off, I'll be happy.
Outstanding. You'll probably mention that on your Instagram as well, if as we get closer to that.
I hope so. I've got tickets to sell. I need to.
Absolutely. I've got t-shirts to sell. I'm wearing one if you're watching on YouTube. Mr. Furious Records t-shirts that go along with our Darker Dimensions crossover event and the albums associated with that. And all the other, all the standard Mr. Furious stuff in the notes. Sheffield area listeners, thanks for joining us. We would love to have you subscribe either on your podcast app of choice or on YouTube or both. But if you like this type of conversation, I am based in Lawrence, Kansas, and primarily have talked with other musicians around this area, but I do have more ideas on branching out, and this thing with Matt has gone very well, I feel, so I will be doing some more experiments like that, and let's grow this whole thing into we're a global podcast now. Isn't that something? Out of my laundry room in the basement in Lawrence, Kansas. Fantastic. But thanks again, Matt.
Thanks for having
we'll be
me.
talking more. Absolutely. And here is M Tate 27.5 24 on Dat Fury Radio.